Chapter 6, Social Structure Theories. In this chapter, we shift our focus away from individual traits and look at how social conditions and environments influence crime. Social structure theories argue that crime is largely the result of economic disadvantage, inequality, and neighborhood conditions rather than individual pathology. The United States is considered a stratified society, meaning people are grouped into different economic and social classes. These groups aren't equal. Wealth, power, and prestige are distributed unevenly, which means people start life with very different levels of opportunity. We use the term social class to describe segments of the population whose members share similar income levels, values, norms, attitudes, and lifestyles. Social class affects where people live, the quality of education they receive, the jobs available to them, and even how they experience the criminal justice system. From a criminological perspective, this matters because unequal access to legitimate opportunities can increase the risk of criminal involvement, especially in communities where economic hardship is persistent. Economic structure also helps explain the challenges faced by the lower class. Long-term economic hardship can lead to what's called a culture of poverty, where people develop coping strategies in response to limited opportunities. The term underclass is used to describe individuals who experience chronic unemployment and social isolation. These conditions can weaken connections to institutions like school and work. Poverty is especially impactful for children. Children growing up in poverty are less likely to succeed in school, more likely to drop out, and more likely to experience health problems, factors that can increase their long-term risk for criminal involvement. Economic structure also affects crime through racial and ethnic inequality. Racial minority groups are more likely to experience poverty due to long-standing structural advantages, often described as white privilege, that tend to benefit white individuals over non-white groups. Movements like Black Lives Matter emerged in response to concerns about institutional violence and perceived systemic racism, highlighting how social structures can shape lived experiences across different communities. Overall, social structure theory argues that crime is not primarily the result of individual failure, but rather a consequence of disadvantaged economic positions and unequal access to opportunity within society. Now that we understand how economic conditions shape crime, we can turn to social structure theories more broadly. This perspective includes three independent but overlapping theories that explain how social environments influence criminal behavior. Social disorganization theory focuses on communities where institutions like family, school, and law enforcement have broken down, reducing informal social control. Strain theory looks at the pressure people experience when they are unable to achieve socially valued goals through legitimate means. And finally, cultural deviance theory emphasizes how certain groups develop subcultures with values that may conflict with mainstream society. Together, these theories help explain how crime is shaped by social structure rather than individual choice alone. The first social structure theory we'll look at is social disorganization theory. This theory links crime rates to the characteristics of neighborhoods rather than to the traits of individuals. Crime tends to be highest in neighborhoods that are transient, mixed use, or constantly changing, where the fabric of social life is weakened. In these areas, residents are likely to form strong social ties or exercise informal social control. As crime increases, those who can afford to leave often do, which further destabilizes the neighborhood and allows crime to persist over time. Social disorganization theory is largely based on the research of Clifford Shaw and Henry McKay, who studied crime patterns in Chicago. They found that crime rates remained high in certain areas, even as different groups moved in and out. They focused on transitional neighborhoods, which are areas experiencing constant population change and structural instability. These neighborhoods often lack strong social ties. Using the concentric zone model, Shaw and McKay showed that crime was highest closest to the city center and decreased as distance increased. Their legacy is the idea that place matters. Crime is strongly influenced by neighborhood conditions, not the individuals who live there. And Figure 6.3 illustrates Shaw and McKay's social disorganization theory using rates of male delinquency in Chicago neighborhoods. The Arabic numerals on the map represent delinquencies per area. What's important here is the pattern. Delinquency rates are highest in the inner transitional zones closest to the city center and decline as you move outward. This pattern remained consistent over time, even when the population in these areas changed. This visual supports Sean McKay's key conclusion that crime is tied to place, not to the traits of the people living there. The social ecology school expands on social disorganization by looking at how broader community conditions influence crime. Factors like community disorder, such as abandoned buildings or visible crime, can increase fear among residents. Over time, this fear can lead to a siege mentality, where people withdraw from one another instead of working together. Frequent community change combined with concentration of poverty weakens the neighborhood stability and informal social control. As these conditions build, the community becomes less able to regulate behavior, allowing crime to persist. An important concept within social disorganization theory is collective efficacy, which refers to a community's ability to work together to maintain order. It includes mutual trust among residents, willingness to supervise children, and shared responsibility for maintaining public spaces. Collective efficacy operates through different forms of control. Informal social control comes from neighbors intervening in everyday situations. Institutional social control involves schools, churches, and local organizations, while public social control includes police and other formal authorities. Communities with long collective efficacy tend to experience lower crime rates because residents are more likely to intervene and support one another. So here we're summarizing the two major approaches within social disorganization theory. Sean McKay's concentric zones theory argues that crime is a product of transitional neighborhoods where poverty and disorganization weaken shared values and social control. One strength of this approach is that it explains why crime remains concentrated in certain areas and helps guide prevention programs. Social ecology theory expands this area by focusing on the broader problems of urban life, such as fear, unemployment, deterioration, and siege mentality. This perspective emphasizes how social control and collective efficacy influence crime patterns over time. Together, these theories reinforce the idea that crime is strongly shaped by neighborhood conditions and not individual characteristics alone. We're now moving into strain theories, which focus on how pressure within society can lead to crime. One important version is institutional anomy theory, which connects crime to the structure of American society itself. This theory is closely tied to the American dream, which emphasizes a shared goal of economic success. The problem arises when society places more emphasis on achieving the goal than on following legitimate processes to reach it. When people perceive economic and social inequality, this imbalance can lead to feelings of envy, mistrust, and aggression, emotions that increase the likelihood of criminal behavior. Another key approach is general strain theory, or GST, which focuses on how strain leads to negative emotional states such as anger, frustration, or resentment. GST recognizes that strain can come from multiple sources. This includes failing to achieve positively valued goals, experience a gap between expectations and actual outcomes, losing something important, or being exposed to negative or harmful situations. These types of strain can produce emotional responses that increase the likelihood of crime, especially when individuals lack healthy coping strategies or social support. The final social structure approach we'll examine is cultural deviance theory, which combines elements of both social disorganization and strain. This theory suggests that members of the lower socioeconomic class may develop an independent subculture with its own rules, beliefs, and expectations. These norms emerge as adaptations to limited opportunities and ongoing strain. Because these subcultural values often conflict with conventional social norms, behaviors viewed as criminal by mainstream society may be considered acceptable or normal within the subculture itself. Cultural deviance theory is closely tied to the area of focal concerns, which are values that can develop within certain subcultures. These include an emphasis on toughness, street smarts, excitement, and sometimes the acceptance of illegal or violent behavior as a way to gain respect or status. These values are passed down through a process known as cultural transmission, where norms and behaviors are learned from peers and community members rather than from mainstream institutions. Gang culture is a common example of this process, where shared values and behaviors are reinforced over time and can contribute to continued involvement in crime. One influential version of cultural deviance theory is Albert Cohen's theory of delinquent subcultures. Outlined in Delinquent Boys, Cohen argued that lower class youth often experience status frustration when they're judged using middle class measuring rods, such as academic success and conformity. When these goals feel unattainable, some youths respond through reaction formation, rejecting middle class values and forming deviant subcultures instead. Within these groups, behaviors that are criticized by mainstream society may become sources of status and respect. Another key explanation within cultural deviance theory is the theory of differential opportunity, which argues that not all individuals have access to either legitimate or illegitimate means of success. As a result, different types of gangs emerge based on available opportunities. Criminal gangs form in areas where organized crime opportunities exist and focus on profit-oriented activities. Conflict gangs develop in disorganized neighborhoods where violence is used to gain status and respect rather than financial gain. Retreatist gangs are made up of individuals who are unsuccessful in both legitimate and illegitimate pursuits and often withdraw into substance use. This theory highlights how crime patterns vary depending on the opportunities available within a given social environment. Social structure theory also has important public policy implications because it suggests that crime can be reduced by addressing underlying social and economic conditions. One approach involves public assistance or welfare programs, which aim to reduce poverty and economic strain. Policies also focus on improving community structure in lower income, high crime areas by strengthening neighborhoods and local institutions. During the War on Poverty, programs like Head Start, Neighborhood Legal Services, and the Community Action Program were designed to expand opportunity and reduce inequality. More recently, models like Communities That Care or CTC emphasize prevention by building strong, supportive communities to reduce the risk factors associated with crime. Social structure theory has also influenced how the criminal justice system responds to crime. One example is the broken windows perspective, which links visible social disorder to more serious crime. Based on this idea, some police programs focus on reducing disorder by addressing lifestyle crimes, such as panhandling, loitering, and vandalism. The goal is to restore order within communities and strengthen informal social control. This approach reflects the broader idea that community conditions matter when it comes to crime prevention.